Welcome back to Leading Giants, the influence mastery company, and we are talking about general communication right now and things that giants do. We just got done talking about getting concrete data, and now we're going to talk about guiding people or leading people out of the cage. What does this mean? It means that when people get stuck or they get trapped, it's because they don't know how to think or their emotions are in the way of their ability to think. So think about this. If you wake up in the morning and you're a high performer and your alarm goes off, your immediate thought is, I need to get out of bed, okay? If you're not a high performer, your immediate thought is, I need to hit the snooze. That's a thought process. It's a decision process right there. So if you were gonna guide that person at that first intense moment, that honorable moment that takes place when the alarm goes off and they say, I need to hit the snooze, you're gonna go, no, rewire that. I need to get out of bed now. And you've guided them in thought, and here they are. These decision points. I remember talking to this one particular person who was at a holiday gathering, and they said, I have just gained so much weight. I need to lose this. They weren't joking. They took the hugest scoop of whipped cream, okay, and their pumpkin pie was there. They go, I just don't know. Slapped it down where to start. And it was so fun. They started laughing before everybody else because they were not trying to make a joke. But when they did that, it was obvious to everyone. So we literally, in these most obvious things, through either emotions or pride or fear, we stop our thinking process. Or it's a lack of experience or intellect. So if you have a guide to help somebody through that thought process, you can get there. I remember when I became a pilot, going through pilot training, you would have to make a lot of decisions. And as you're flying, you're starting to make these decisions, but if you're thinking the wrong way, your instructor had this great ability to basically go, well, let's do this first. And you consider these things. There's a lot of different types of things like that. And in pilot training, it works out pretty well because most things in life, hey, if you do this, if you don't listen to everything we're saying and you don't take these steps, then, there's this little outcome. In pilot training, it's like do ... or you'll die. So it's pretty high motivation to actually getting it right. But the idea here is that when you're working with this particular person, they've got an emotional thing that's blocking them, you need to take them through the step process to get there. So there's two parts to this as we're talking about leading them or guiding them out of the cage. What does it actually mean? So when they get trapped in the cage, just like that, I got to hit my alarm example, they're just stuck. There's 8 minutes of low productivity that they're not going to have that they can't take back. They just literally put themselves in a cage and they got to get out. And a lot of times they just hit it again and they just stay in the cage. And if you guide them, you turn them around, you can get out of the cage. So there's two different areas of this. One is denial about what's taking them down the wrong track. The other one is that they're not actually totally in the cage, but you need to give them flight, okay? So how does this work? Going back to that earlier example of a person who was supposed to do, and this is in the previous episode, 40 appointments in 1 month. They're denying it. They're not getting there. So you need to use a very high level of emotional intelligence to put them in an area of safety to get them to speak about what they are. And some people would call this trapping them. A manipulator, a narcissist, a gotta-get-you person, or a passive-aggressive person would do that. They would basically be doing what a lawyer would be doing to, a defendant on the stand to get them tripped up to say something that can be used against them. You're using some of the same principles, but you're using them for the entirely opposite reason. You're using it to free them. The narcissist puts you in a corner and then mocks you. And they walk away when you're not looking. They slam the cage and they throw away the key. What you're doing is you're going with the person that's already put themselves in a corner and can't find the key, let alone the door. And by asking these particular questions, you get them right in front of the doorway and you hand them the key so they can reach around, unlock it, and free themselves. How do you do that? Well, I know that you said that you are following the program, you did 40 appointments. So the interesting thing about that would be, since the closing percentage is 20%, you would be at about 8 sales and you have 2. So it'd be unusual that you're performing at a level that would be 4 times less than everybody else, like 25% of what you should be doing as opposed to 100%. And so I would wonder whether it was exactly 40 or not. Well, now, by the way, what is motivating them to not admit 40? Pride. Now you've just struck something else. You struck, are you not smart enough to do it? I mean, you didn't say that, but basically you pointed out this underperformance. What's going to happen? Their pride's going to, well, you know what? Right. I mean, hey, I can close sales. It might not have been 40. It might not have been 40. Now you would step in and you would help them and you'd say, I get that. Because a lot of times when you're getting started in something, you're doing it feels like 40 because there's a lot of emotional energy that you're investing into something. And it's even exhausting at the end of the day, even if you did the same activity, because you're thinking about it. It's a little bit harder. In fact, even in martial arts, it's that way too, where I can remember early on in martial arts, you know, you're going to spar for the first time and you're super anxious because you have no idea what's about to happen. And, you know, you just, the anxiety is overwhelming. The more experience you have, the more you've seen everything come, it doesn't really matter. If you remember back in the day of either watching the story, hearing the story, if you're old enough to actually see the story of George Foreman when he came back as an old guy who was, you know, he's sponsoring KFC at the time. I mean, he's got like, you know, a belly like you wouldn't believe. This is before the George Foreman grill, okay? And he's fighting guys half his age in shape twice as good as him. And he's winning. How? The fights were hilarious to watch. These guys that were going to fight him, they knew that George Foreman has seen every single punch by the best people on planet Earth. And he's done it so many times over that there's no way they're going to intimidate him. There's no way they're going to give him something he hasn't seen. And he would just sit there with like one piece of chicken in a hand going, dodging out of the way, barely moving. These guys had anxiety and he'd just be like, boom, and win. It was fascinating and awesome. And I loved watching this guy become the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world at 50 years old. Why? Because his experience relaxed him. If you know that about the people you're leading, you know they're going to have earlier anxiety. They're going to believe and feel like they've worked a lot because emotionally in their mind they have. They're like, no, I put in a full day's work. And they're so blinded by this idea of the anxiety that they can't actually objectively go, you know what? The actual work that I did was 45 minutes today, but the amount of work that I spent on worrying about it was massive. The outcome of exhaustion is still the same, whether it was real work or imagined anxious work. And so that's where this comes in as a key for a leader, is to say, okay, I get that. But so it wasn't 40 appointments. And what do you think the number actually was? You know, to be honest, it was probably more like 30. The experienced giant would say this. Yeah, I bet. Do you know what I've learned actually? I have learned that even the people who become the top performers, they're so nervous that when they say 40, no, it's probably 30. Usually it's more like 15. Do you think it might have been 15? I mean, if it was 15, that 2 sales would make sense. You would still probably be more at 3, but in the range. What is your closing percentage? Oh, my closing percentage is 20%. That's what I thought. So it was 10 appointments then, huh? See what you just did? You literally outsmarted them. You asked them, what's your closing percentage? And their pride had to tell you that their closing percentage was average, which means by default, they only did 10 appointments. This is a very person that claimed 40 ahead of time. By the way, in an employee relationship, this can still happen. If you're leading an independent contractor, this is more likely because they have the ability to say, no, I'm not doing this full amount because they're working independently, whereas an employee might have gotten fired earlier and because of that, stood up straighter and done what they were supposed to do because there's a more immediate impact for an employee than there generally is an independent contractor. But this would be considered by the attorney entrapment. You just trapped that person into admitting it was 10. You tricked them. You would be tricking them if you weren't on their side trying to free them. But when you ask that question, what is your closing percentage? And automatically by default, it means they're admitting 10 appointments. You gave them the key, turned them around, and put them right in front of the cage so they can walk out. If you just asked it to say, it's only 10? You lied to me. You said 40. You're fired. Well, yeah, then you just tricked him into it. But is that really your goal? I mean, is your goal to find everything bad about so you can get rid of them? I had a case that was almost exactly like the one that I just mentioned to you before. And the person was angry. It was actually kind of confrontational, blaming the company, blaming the opportunity, blaming everything, a little bit of tears. I finally calmed it down and I said, I just want you to know I'm on your side and that I only want one thing out of this. I want you to do great because I believe that you can do great, and I just want to help you get out of your own way. That person went on to crush it immediately after that. In fact, in that actual example, it was 3 months of very low performance, and 1 month later, they had actually done more in 1 month than they had done in the previous 3, and were on fire, lit, and very loyal to the organization because I helped them free themselves from the cage. Now, there's other performers too. This is a different thing. There are people who aren't lying, they're not manipulating, they're not self-justifying numbers. They just don't know what the heck to do. They don't know how to do it. So you're guiding and leading them is not so much out of the cage as it is into flight. Okay, so they're doing something wrong. This could be as simple as a golf swing. Okay, the golfer thinks they're doing it right, but they're lifting their head. They can't see it. They don't know it. It's an unconscious thing. You show them in the video, you describe it to them, show them how to keep their head down, and they start hitting the golf club better. It's a thought process followed by a physical action, and it takes place. Now, oftentimes in business, it's not a physical action, it's simply the thought process. Okay, well, you're thinking that if you do the presentation this way and you say this, the customer is going to think that and you're going to get this outcome. You're misreading that. Actually, what you should say and think is this. So if you say and think this, you're going to get this outcome. And you guide them through it because their thought process is off. This is very much like the little 21 questions little machine. Okay, have you ever seen this? So you can buy it at like a grocery store for, or a Walgreens, let alone Walmart, for like $9. And it says to you, let's play 20 questions. And you're like, okay. And it doesn't, you don't program it at all. It just says to you, think of a word. And you're like, okay. And you have asparagus in your head. And it says, is it smaller than a shoebox? And you're like, yes. Is it a mineral? No, I got it now. And you're like, I've defeated this thing. And all of a sudden, by the 7th question, it says asparagus. And you're like, how in the world did this $9 item do that? It's way smarter than me. There's no way I would have gotten that. Why did it? The reason it did is because it entirely leaves emotions out and it uses logical deductions in order to get the answer. What we do instead is we say, is it smaller than a shoebox? Yes. Rock on. Is it a mineral? No. Dang. Oh man, I only have 18 left. I don't know. Is it your mom? No, it's not your mom. And then we just stop. We give up or we drift away. We stop using rational deductions to get there. There's no way that little machine is smarter than you. You're way smarter than it. But we get our emotions in the way. So it's important for us to help people get their emotions out of the way so they can get to the actual concrete data that they need to in order to find the solutions. And when they can't, we guide and lead them to the outcomes. Giants lead people to their own freedom. They lead them to flight. They lead them out of the cage. You can do that, and then we can go slay some dragons.